Hello, I am Rich Tabor of Cornell Cooperative Extension of Shenango County, New York, working in collaboration with the Chobani Foundation. And the title of today's presentation is going to be Beef Cattle Fencing. And this is one of a series of videos on beef cattle and sheep management that we have prepared. Now, as far as beef cattle fencing, we're going to discuss some of the different types of fencing and their importance. The most important thing you have to keep in mind is that your perimeter fencing, that's either your boundary fences or your property boundary fences or your outer limits of your fences, those are what are known as perimeter fences. And regardless of the type of fence that you have, they must be of good quality. And then, of course, your interior fences are the ones which you use to break your fields up into manageable size paddocks of a few acres at a time to do your improved rotational grazing. But we'll talk about some of the different types of perimeter fencing. One of the most common is high tensile fencing, which is electrified high tensile fencing. And then we also have woven wire high tensile fencing. And we could use stock panels. And then we can use barbed wire. Those are some of the common alternatives in use here in the Northeast. So we'll go right in and talk about the high tensile electric fencing because that's one of the most common alternatives here. And it's electric fencing. And there's several considerations you must keep in mind when you're putting up high tensile electrified fencing. One of the first considerations is, how are you going to pay for this? It can be very, very expensive to construct any kind of fencing system, high tensile electric in particular. Whether you do it yourself or you hire a contractor, it is very expensive. And that's why you need to sit down and plan out these fences, especially if you come onto a new property and there are either no existing fences or mediocre ones which need to be replaced or improved. One of the most important things you have to do is figure the overall length of your proposed new electric fencing and any existing fencing which you might want to improve or electrify. Then you have to think about where are you going to locate your laneways and your gateways. The laneways are where the animals go out to the paddocks, and at certain times of the year this can be quite an issue with our torrential rains that we get at certain times of the year. So laneways and gateways are very important. Then, where are you going to locate your supply lines of electricity, which come from your Energizer, which is typically located near your barn? How's that going to get out there to all the perimeter fences? Another thing to consider is where you're going to place your cutout switches. And a cutout switch is a switch you put out on the property so you can turn off the electricity way out in your fields rather than having to run back to the barn every time you want to turn power on and off while you're working on your fence. Then, of course, we have to decide on what kind of Energizer we're going to use. Are we going to use an AC-powered Energizer or a battery-powered Energizer or a solar-powered Energizer? Now, typically, your battery and solar-powered Energizers are good for smaller lengths of wire. It's kind of difficult to power an entire perimeter fence with just solar or battery-powered fences. And a typical size of an AC-powered low-impedance charger is anywhere around 12 to 15 joules. And there's several decent brands out there nowadays, and they're kind of expensive. A good charger can cost you upwards of $1,000, $1,200, and you have to take proper precautions with the lightning rod protection so they don't get blown up during power surges and electric storms. And of course, we mentioned the size, typically a 12 to 15 joule. And where are you going to put it? Near the barn, yes, but then where are we going to locate the grounds? And typically, you need at least 3 or more ground rods, and there's lots of information available out there to tell you the specifics on how deep the ground rods need to go and how far apart, but you do need properly located and installed ground rods, and ground rod failure is one of the biggest sources of inconsistent electricity in your perimeter fences. Now, we'll talk about some of the other choices, such as woven wire high tensile fencing. And I kind of prefer that kind of fencing because you're not dependent on electricity. And we have frequent power failures here in the Northeast on a year-round basis. Seems to be getting a little bit more frequently in recent years. And once animals find out the power is off, it doesn't take them long to ignore those fences, and then they escape. But woven wire can work very well. You will need to have a device that goes on the 3-point hitch of your tractor to stretch the wire and attach it to your fences. But once woven wire is up, it takes minimal maintenance. Not no maintenance, but minimal. And that you have to go out and check it a couple times a year because tree limbs can still fall down on those fences and they can crush the fences enough to the point where animals can escape. And the same would apply with our stock panels if we want to use them, 16-foot panels. The beauty of using 16-foot panels is that they're very simple to erect. All you have to do is pound your posts in the ground and then attach your panels, and you're good to go. Then we'll talk about our last choice is barbed wire. And we see less and less use of barbed wire in recent years. You may come onto a property which has old barbed wire fences. There may be some life left in them, but you don't want to go through all the ordeal of replacing the entire old barbed wire fence. To get a few more years of life, you can string up electric wire on the inside of that barbed wire fence. But barbed wire fences have fallen into disfavor somewhat in recent years because you can use them with beef cattle, but you can't use them with horses or sheep. They take a lot of maintenance, especially once they're up and new for a couple years, they look good. And then as they age, they get loose, they start falling apart. Now, one caveat we might mention is that do not ever try to make a perimeter fence using temporary electric wires, such as polywire or electric netting, because deer can wreak havoc with those kinds of fences in short order, and we do not want animals escaping. I might mention the amount of voltage we need, regardless of the electric fencing, whether it's perimeter or for our interior paddocks. 3,000 volts seems to be about the minimum, and 5,000 volts is ideal. 5,000 volts and above. And that way the animals will learn to respect that fence and they'll remain contained. So that's kind of in a nutshell talking about some of the broad principles of electric fencing. Good luck with your fencing and your grazing, and have a good day.